The creepy reel brings you the window. I came here for a fresh start. Life has dealt me a terrible hand over the past few years, and I've been at the bottom of a rock and the bottom of a bottle more times than I like to remember. Sometimes starting over is the best remedy. This little sleepy town will be a good cure. I rented a cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city with what little savings I had left. Paid 3 months' rent in advance to take the burden off settling in. All I've got left to my name is $200 and a hope for better days. It was far enough away from the chaos of the city, but close enough to commute. It didn't take me long to find work. I'm sort of a jack of all trades after all. I landed a job at a local hardware store as a salesperson. Really, I was just a glorified cashier. But I'm new here, and I need the money. My apartment was located on the top floor of a complex in a not-so-great part of town. But it was quiet and secluded. There was even a working elevator, which was unusual for a place this rundown, but hey, I'll take a win when I get one. It was cozy here, in a cheap motel kind of way. The place was listed as furnished and had an open floor plan with 4 giant windows facing me as I entered. It was bright and airy, especially with the windows open. It felt like a beach house, if that beach house had old rusty appliances, paint stripping off the walls and crime at your doorstep. I enjoyed the privacy and the peace for a few months before my reality became twisted again. It started with little events occurring on the outside of my windows. Things like a shadow quickly passing by or a flash of light. It never scared me, but out of paranoia I would check anyways. There was never anyone or anything out there to create the shadows I've been seeing, so I always shrugged it off as being a trick of the eye. The prior tenant declined to have blinds installed because no one could really see inside, though I did consider them after these strange occurrences. What's alarming though is I'm on the top floor of the tallest building in this complex, so technically speaking, no one else has line of sight to any of my windows. It seemed impossible for any object to pass by. Birds were too small to create the shadowy flashes I've been seeing. It's almost as if someone turned the sun off for a fraction of a second. Anyways, this went on for a few days before I started losing focus on the world around me. I was constantly drawn to the window, always staring outside, hoping to catch the shadow or object or whatever it was. I've been losing sleep over this, getting fewer hours of slumber each night. I picked up the phone and called my manager and tell him I had more settling in to do. He hung up without questioning me. It was 8 a.m. and I found myself standing in the middle of the room staring at all 4 windows in some sort of a daze. What once were brief flashes or a sick joke of tired eyes was now a visible occurrence. The shadows now lingered. Half a second, to 1 second, to 2. I somehow snapped out of my trance and made my way over to the kitchen counter to grab some liquid bravery. I chugged the burning warmth of the bottle as the sunlight kept flickering on and off repeatedly, turning my apartment from gray to bright. About a week later, I started to feel uneasy. I got the feeling that I was never alone. Chills ran up my spine and fear began to creep into my mind and body. The shadows lingered longer now, as if wanting to be seen. I would stare at the window, but nothing stares back, or at least nothing that I could see. They now started to take shape, forming something. It was not a person or a ghost, but not quite a black emptiness like it used to be. I couldn't stare any longer. The empty void of the window called to me. It just wanted my gaze. I stood up and grabbed my old friend, twisted the cap, and dropped it to the floor before I tilted my head back and let the burn set in. The stress was too much. The drinking didn't make it go away, but it numbed the feeling, for a little at least. I sat in the corner of the room facing the wall with a bottle of whiskey in hand, not wanting to see the oddly shaped shadows at my windows. But I still felt them. Felt them staring, and felt the fear they've now ingrained in me. I woke up, empty bottle in hand with my forehead against the wall, my head pounding from the awkward sleeping position. I felt normal for a moment. Then there it was. The dread. I dared not turn around and face the row of windows behind me. It was even worse this time. It felt like being stared at by a crowd of evil figures you can't see. I had to move. I can't be in this place anymore. I quickly darted up from the chair and grabbed my wallet and keys from the counter, quickly glancing at the windows which were almost completely blackened by the shadows, then dashed out the front door without even bothering to lock it. Running to the elevator, I felt the gaze piercing me from the windows at both ends of the hallway. I hit the elevator button and stood there frozen. Closing my eyes tightly and with clenched fists, I waited impatiently. It was closing in, and I can feel the panic rising inside me until it brought me to a gut-wrenching scream so loud my voice cracked. At that moment, the elevator opened and I basically dived in, pressing the closed door button at least 80 times before they shut. I let out a heavy breath, coughing and gasping for air, not realizing I wasn't breathing the entire time. The elevator door opened on the ground level, and I burst through the main entrance to the world outside. Walking around all day, careful not to enter any buildings with an open window, which was nearly impossible, I decided to process what was really happening. This thing had started manifesting physical reactions in me. Increased heart rate while in view of a window, sweating, constant feeling of fear and unease. It was more than just being watched or movement on the corner of my eye. Where can I go? Who can I see? There isn't any structure without a damn window. I returned home, standing on the front steps of my building, too scared to go in and too tired to stay out. I didn't have the courage to enter the liquor store to replenish my whiskey, so I must face this sober tonight. With the last of my fool's courage, I barged into my apartment, a sudden chill immediately greeting me. I taped sheets to all the windows, being careful not to peek. Taping the windows with my eyes barely open while being terrified was no easy feat. I only had about 5 hours of actual sleep last night. I dove into bed and cocooned myself underneath the blanket. Once things quieted down, I felt it. I didn't have to see the windows anymore. I felt the dread creep into my bones once again, as if pure evil were locked in this place with me. I shivered as I broke into a cold sweat. My body felt heavy from the pressure of the ominous presence. This pressure began sinking me into the bed as if something was slowly laying its weight on top of me. At first, barely touching, then increasing the pressure over time. I cried. I laid there and just cried. I've slept even less last night. The fatigue has made its home in my body. I awoke from bed and slowly opened my eyes to notice how dark the room is. Despite my limited vision and being pressured, I did pretty good at blocking most of the light out. I felt almost normal for a moment. I didn't feel the eyes staring at me nor the chills up my spine. My heart rate was steady, and I wondered if this was all a bad dream, amplified by my poor drinking habits. With a half smile on my face, I grabbed the handle of the bathroom door, and just before turning the knob, I heard it. Very faintly at first, then again, and again, and again, in a low growl-like whisper. Window. This was the first time I've heard anything. Was it in my head? Was it coming from the windows? I spun around quickly on one heel and my eyes dashed around the apartment. But it was empty. I was the only one here. The volume of the whispers grew increasingly louder and multiplied as if 1,000 voices were loudly whispering out of sync right next to my eardrums. I squeezed my ears with the palms of my hand and screamed until my lungs ran out of air. Still screaming, tears from my tightly shut eyes as the voices grew louder and louder. Then suddenly, silence. I dropped to my knees and removed my palms, wiping the tears from my eyes. I opened them, facing my windows, and looked closely once my vision cleared from the salty tears that filled them. There it was, the top of its head and two giant, yellow, unblinking eyes staring back at me. The sclera of its eyes veiny red as it didn't break its gaze. There was no nose, no mouth, no expression, just a wide-eyed stare as if it were forcing its eyes to be bigger and more open. Staring back at the thing, I heard it speak to me in its own heavy, growling voice.
Window.
I jumped up and dashed as quickly as I could towards it. Maybe it was bravery, or maybe it was my surrender. I couldn't discern. All I knew is that it was time to end this madness. Its unwavering gaze remained fixated on my movements. My arms formed a confident and powerful runner's stance as I charged forward. I could feel the wind cooling my wet eyes from the sheer speed of my acceleration. With one heavy footstep in front of the other, I leaped, twisted my torso, aiming my right shoulder at the window. The sound of shattering glass and cracking wood was the last thing I remembered. This story was an original creation by me. Please feel free to follow me at The Creepy Reel on Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube. Text versions of my narrations will be posted on Reddit first, so stay tuned in for sneak peeks into upcoming stories. Thank you, and stay creepy.